Hello, survivors. Thanks for joining us today. Before we begin, if you enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel. It really means a lot. Also, tell us in the comments which city you're listening from. It's great to see how far our community reaches. Now, let's start the story. The coffee was lukewarm, just the way Gary always left it. He claimed the old percolator in the transmitter shack made the best brew, but I swear he just liked punishing the next guy on shift. Still, it was coffee, and the caffeine was a welcome. Kickstart to another long, solitary day maintaining the KBQR regional broadcast tower. My name's Liam, and for the past 2 years, this metal spire piercing the sky above the thickly forested ridges outside Northgate had been my office. 12-hour shifts, mostly monitoring equipment, running diagnostics and enjoying the kind of peace and quiet you only find miles from the nearest town, with just the wind whistling through the tower struts and the endless green of the national forest stretching below for company. Gary, the overnight guy I'd just relieved, mumbled something about weird static on the emergency bands and more animal activity around the perimeter fence than usual, before driving off down the winding gravel access road in his beat-up Bronco. Typical Gary paranoia, I thought, settling into the worn chair in the main control room. The tower complex wasn't much. This main building housing the control consoles, transmitters, backup generators, and a small kitchenette bunk area. Plus, the towering metal lattice structure itself piercing the gray morning sky. A chain-link fence circled the compound, mostly to keep deer and the occasional bear away from the sensitive equipment. It was isolated, sure, but usually peaceful. Today felt different. The usual dawn chorus of birds was absent. The air felt heavy, still, charged with a tension I couldn't place. It was just after 7 a.m. when the first anomaly occurred. The main KBQR broadcast, some syndicated morning talk show droning on about gardening tips, abruptly cut out, replaced by the harsh, grating tone of the emergency alert system. I nearly jumped out of my seat, spilling lukewarm coffee down my uniform shirt. The automated voice began, stark and devoid of inflection. The following message is transmitted at the request of local and state authorities. An unexplained viral outbreak has been reported in multiple metropolitan areas. Symptoms include extreme aggression, fever, and necrosis. The message cut off mid-sentence, dissolving into a burst of harsh static before the regular broadcast resumed. The host now sounding confused, apologizing for the technical difficulties. Viral outbreak? Necrosis? Sounded serious. I checked. The wire feeds on the secondary monitor. Nothing. Major news sites were reporting minor civil disturbances in Philadelphia, Atlanta, Denver, flash mobs, protests gone wrong, nothing concrete, no mention of a virus. Maybe a localized issue? Or a system test that went wrong? Still, Gary's comment about weird static. I switched the main comms panel over to monitor emergency frequencies. Police, fire, EMS, National Guard channels for the Northgate region, and the closest major city, Edgewood, about 60 miles south. Mostly routine chatter, but interspersed, with calls that made my skin prickle. Multiple reports of assaults downtown Edgewood, subjects exhibiting extreme violence. Requesting backup, officer down, repeat, officer down near the University Hospital. Subject is biting. EMS Unit 12, proceed with caution, scene is not secure, multiple hostiles reported. National Guard mobilizing, establishing. Roadblocks on I-84 South. Biting, hostiles, roadblocks? This was escalating fast. The reports were fragmented, chaotic, but painting a deeply disturbing picture. I tried my cell. No signal bars. Not unusual up here. The tower often interfered, but usually I could find a sweet spot near the window. Today, nothing. Landline? Dead. Just a faint, pulsing hum on the line. Okay, officially weird. The tower had backup satellite comms, but those were for dire emergencies, requiring authorization codes I didn't have. I was effectively cut off, except for what I could hear bleeding through the radio waves. My sister Clara lived in Edgewood. Single mom, worked as a nurse at that same university hospital mentioned in the police dispatch. My stomach twisted. I fired up the auxiliary transmitter, keyed the mic for the hospital's dedicated emergency channel, praying their comms were still up. Edgewood University Medical Center. This is KBQR Tower requesting a welfare check on staff nurse Clara Evans. Repeat, Clara Evans. Anyone copy? Only static answered. Hissing, spitting static, occasionally punctuated by sounds that might have been screams or maybe just interference. I tried again, louder this time, my voice tight with rising panic. Nothing. I went to the main window of the control room, grabbing the high-powered binoculars we kept for inspecting the upper tower levels. The view was panoramic, overlooking miles of dense forest, the winding ribbon of the highway leading south, and in the hazy distance, the smudge of Edgewood City. Even from here, I could see something was wrong. Plumes of black smoke rose from multiple points within the city. Thin columns at first, then thicker, angrier. Through the binoculars, I could just make out the flashing lights of emergency vehicles, stationary, clustered in patterns that suggested chaos, not control. Cars on the distant highway were stopped, a massive pileup visible even from miles away. Gary hadn't been paranoid. This wasn't a drill. This wasn't a localized incident. This was something else, something big, something terrifying. And I was stuck here, alone on top of a mountain, listening to the world fall apart through crackling static. The long hours of the morning crawled by, each minute stretched thin by the horrifying snippets of information gleaned from the radio. The picture emerging was fragmented but terrifyingly consistent across different channels and locations. Rapid onset illness, fever, extreme aggression, biting, victims dying then, reanimating. Resilient to injury, only stopping with catastrophic damage, specifically to the head. Zombies. The word felt absurd, unreal, ripped from the fiction I consumed during long shifts. Yet the panicked voices of police officers, the desperate pleas of dispatchers, the broken transmissions from overwhelmed military units, they all painted the same impossible picture. They don't stay down. Headshots, aim for the head. Barricade breached at the courthouse. Repeat, barricade is static. Fort Mercer reporting perimeter compromised, requesting immediate air support. More static, then a burst of automatic gunfire followed by screams. This is Survivor Outpost Alpha. Does anyone copy? We are surrounded. Silence. The official emergency alert system tried to maintain a semblance of order, broadcasting intermittent messages advising citizens to shelter in place, lock doors, avoid contact. But the messages became increasingly frantic, less authoritative, until they too dissolved into nonsensical fragments or were abruptly cut off mid-broadcast. The system was collapsing under the weight of the unfolding catastrophe. My attempts to reach Clara remained fruitless. The hospital channel was silent. Her cell went straight to a network unavailable message. Guilt gnawed at me. I should be down there trying to get to her. But how? The highway was a death trap. My old Jeep parked outside wouldn't survive. The chaos I'd glimpsed through the binoculars. The tower, this isolated steel and concrete box, was paradoxically the safest place I could be, yet it felt like a prison. My job was to maintain the broadcast signal, the emergency relays. But who was left to broadcast to? Around 11 a.m., the power grid failed. The main lights flickered and died, plunging the control room into the dim red glow of the emergency. Lighting. Backup generators kicked in automatically with a deep rumble from the equipment room below, restoring power to essential systems. But the brief outage was a stark reminder of my vulnerability. How long would the fuel last? Days? A week? I focused on what I could control. Security. The compound fence was sturdy chain link topped with barbed wire, enough to deter animals but unlikely to stop determined, unfeeling attackers. The main building door was heavy steel, multiple locks. The windows were thick, reinforced glass designed to withstand mountain weather. Defensible, but not impregnable. I went downstairs to the equipment room, the hum of the generators vibrating through the concrete floor. Tools lined the walls and wrenches, cutters, welding gear. I grabbed a heavy pipe wrench, its weight feeling solid, useful in my hand. I also found an emergency flare gun with a dozen cartridges, standard safety equipment for a remote site like this. Not exactly a weapon, but better than nothing. I checked the small attached bunk room, a cot, a mini fridge stocked with Gary's questionable leftovers, a locker. Inside the locker, tucked beneath spare uniforms, I found something Gary hadn't mentioned, a Mossberg 500 shotgun and a box of deer slugs. Bless Gary's paranoia. He'd clearly bent the rules about personal firearms on site. I checked the action, chambered around. The familiar, solid click was the most reassuring sound I'd heard all day. Back in the control room, I scanned the perimeter through the windows. The forest seemed unnaturally still. No birds, no squirrels, just the wind sighing through the pines. Then, movement. Near the gate, a single figure stumbling out of the tree line onto the gravel access road. My heart hammered. I raised the binoculars. It was a woman, or had been. Her clothes were torn, smeared with dirt and something dark. One arm hung at a useless, broken angle. Her head lolled, jaw slack, eyes milky white and vacant. She moved with that characteristic jerky gait, shuffling toward the fence, drawn perhaps by the faint hum of the generators or the imposing structure of the tower itself. A zombie. Here, miles from the city chaos. It wasn't just an urban problem anymore, it was spreading. She reached the fence, pale fingers gripping the chain link. She didn't seem to register it as a barrier, just pressed against it, making low, guttural moaning sounds. More figures emerged from the trees behind her. 2 men, equally ragged, equally to wrong, then another and another. Within minutes, a dozen of them were pressed against the fence, rattling the chain link. Their dead eyes fixed on the building, on me, though I stayed back from the window. They weren't strong, individually. Their movements were uncoordinated, but their persistence was terrifying. They didn't feel pain, didn't tire. They just kept pushing, rattling, testing. The fence wouldn't hold forever. I needed to reinforce the building. The main door was steel, but the windows, though reinforced, felt like weak points. I remembered seeing sheets of plywood stacked in the generator room, likely for storm repairs. Using the pipe wrench and heavy-duty bolts from the workshop, I began securing the plywood over the control room windows, leaving only small slits to see through. It was hard, sweaty work, my muscles aching, fear a constant co-pilot. Every hammer blow felt like an invitation, echoing out into the unnatural quiet, potentially drawing more of them. As I worked, I kept the emergency frequencies playing softly. The news was uniformly bad. Military units reporting heavy casualties, communication breakdowns, orders to fall back to fortified zones. Civilian channels were a mess of panicked pleas for help, tearful goodbyes, and chilling silences. One transmission cut through the static clearer than the others, seemingly hijacking the main emergency broadcast channel. Not a virus, a calm, almost scholarly male voice stated. Reanimation is secondary effect. Primary vector is consciousness transference, parasitic intelligence, seeks active neural pathways. Bite is transmission, yes, but also proximity, strong emotion, fear. They learn. They adapt. Sheltering in place only delays. They are drawn to the living. Drawn to. The transmission ended abruptly, replaced by the standard EAS tone, then silence. Parasitic intelligence, consciousness transference. It sounded like science fiction, but it resonated with the unnatural coordination I'd glimpsed in the city. Mimics from the shelter story. The focused hunger in the eyes of the things outside my fence. Were these more than just mindless eating machines? Were they puppets controlled by something else? Something intelligent? The thought was interrupted by a new sound, metal screeching. I ran back to the control room window slit. One of the infected, a large man who might have been a lumberjack in his previous life, was systematically tearing at the chain-link fence with his bare, bloody hands. Metal strands snapped, the wire mesh groaning under the unnatural strength. He wasn't mindless, he was focused, determined, creating a breach. Others crowded behind him, pushing, moaning. The fence wouldn't hold. They were going to get onto the compound, and the steel door was the only thing between them and me. I checked the shotgun again. 5 slugs in the tube, 20 more in the box. Enough for a few, maybe, but not for the dozen already outside, and certainly not for the unknown number that might be drawn by the noise of a fight. I looked up at the tower structure itself, disappearing into the overcast sky. Ladders ran up the inside, accessing the broadcast equipment. High up. Defensible, maybe, but also a trap if they found a way up after me. The fence gave way with a final screech of tearing metal. The infected stumbled through the gap, then paused, heads cocked, sniffing the air, before shuffling, then breaking into that lurching run straight towards the building. Towards me. I slammed the last bolt home on the window barricade, grabbed the shotgun and the pipe wrench, and retreated to the narrow hallway connecting the control room to the generator room and the tower access ladder. There was only one door, one choke point. And they were coming. The pounding started almost immediately. Heavy rhythmic thuds against the steel door. Not frantic, not mindless, but methodical. Testing. They knew I was inside. The metal began to dent inwards. Stress lines appeared around the lock mechanism. It wouldn't hold long against that kind of focused, unnatural force. I backed away from the door, shotgun raised, heart hammering. My little concrete box on the mountain, my sanctuary, was about to become my tomb. The control room was behind me, the generator room and tower access ladder to my left. Where was the most defensible position? The pounding intensified. Crack. The lock mechanism fractured, splinters of metal flying inwards. The door buckled, hinges groaning. They were coming through. I fired the shotgun the moment the door burst open. The slug hit the first infected, the lumberjack, square in the chest. It barely staggered him. Headshot only. Always the head. He lunged, emitting a low, rattling growl. I pumped the action, aimed higher, and fired again. His head exploded in a shower of gore and bone fragments. He dropped like a stone. 2 more crowded the doorway behind him. The woman from the fence, milky eyes fixed on me. Behind her, a man in a mail carrier uniform, half his face missing. I fired again, taking the woman through the eye socket. She collapsed onto the lumberjack. The mailman stumbled over them, reaching. Pump, fire. Another. Headshot. Silence except for my own ragged breathing and the ringing in my ears. But the silence didn't last. More shuffling sounds came from outside the broken doorway. How many were there? I backed further down the hall, toward the generator room. The noise was deafening in here. The diesel engines roaring, vibrating through the floor. Maybe the noise would confuse them, mask my movements. The doorway to the tower access ladder was just ahead. Metal rungs disappeared up into the darkness of the tower's core. It was my only escape route upwards. But then I remembered the radio transmission. Parasitic intelligence. They learn. They adapt. Could they climb? More infected appeared in the control room doorway, silhouetted against the dim emergency lights. 4, 5, 6 of them, shuffling forward, drawn by the generator noise, or maybe just by my presence. I fired the shotgun twice more, dropping the first 2. Click. Empty. Fumbling with the box of slugs, my hands slick with sweat, I tried to reload. Too slow. They were closing the distance. I dropped the shotgun, yanked the Glock from my holster. Smaller caliber, less stopping power, but faster. Pop, pop, pop. Headshots. 2 more went down, but the remaining 2 were almost on me. One grabbed my gun arm, wrenching it, its grip inhumanly strong. Broken teeth snapped inches from my face, its breath indescribably foul. I slammed my elbow into its temple. No effect. Kicked its knee. Bone crunched, but it didn't release me. The second one circled around, trying to flank me. I was trapped. This was it. Then, My eyes fell on the massive electrical conduit running along the wall, feeding power from the generators to the transmitters above. Exposed wires sparked where the initial power surge or the infected's entry had damaged the casing. An idea, born of desperation, flashed through my mind. With a surge of adrenaline, I twisted free from the first infected's grip, shoving it backward into its companion. I lunged for the pipe wrench I'd dropped earlier, as they recovered, and came at me again. I swung the heavy wrench with all my might, not at them, but at the damaged conduit. Metal screamed as the wrench connected. Sparks showered the room. The conduit ruptured. High-voltage electricity arced outward, connecting with the wet concrete floor, connecting with the shuffling, damp bodies of the infected. They spasmed violently, caught in the deadly current. Flesh smoking, bones visible through suddenly translucent skin. Their inhuman moans turned into high-pitched shrieks that abruptly cut off as the electricity overloaded their reanimated nervous systems. They collapsed, twitching, burning, the smell of cooked meat filling the generator room. The lights flickered, generators sputtered as the short circuit overloaded the system. Then, darkness. Absolute darkness, punctuated only by the crackle of dying electricity and the smell of burnt flesh. The backup generators had failed. I was alone in the dark, with the silence, the smell, and the knowledge that the power protecting the transmitters, the very reason for this tower's existence, was gone. I fumbled for my flashlight, clicking it on with shaking hands. The beam cut through the smoke-filled darkness. The generator room was a charnel house. The bodies of the infected lay sprawled amidst the sparking conduit, blackened and still. I backed away, coughing, retreating to the main control room. Without power, the monitors were dark, the radios silent. Only the dim red emergency lights offered any illumination. Outside, the afternoon had faded into deep twilight. Night was falling. The tower, my supposed sanctuary, was now just a dark, cold metal shell on an isolated mountaintop. I checked the barricaded windows. Still secure, but for how long? Without power, without communications, I was truly alone. My only link to the outside world had been the radios, the fragmented voices painting a picture of collapse. Now, only silence remained. Was the outbreak over? Had the military contained it? Or was the silence simply the sound of the world finally succumbing? I went back to the window slit facing Edgewood. The distant city was a canvas of flickering orange against the bruised purple sky. More fires had started. The smoke plumes were thicker, merging into a solid dark cloud that obscured the horizon. It didn't look contained. It looked like hell on earth. And Clara was down there somewhere. My phone was dead, the battery drained. No way to charge it, without power. I found some emergency candles in a supply closet, lit one, the small flame casting dancing shadows across the control panel. I had the shotgun, Gary's gift, and maybe 10 slugs left. The Glock had one full magazine. The flare, gun, the pipe wrench. Enough to survive another immediate attack, maybe. But not enough to fight my way 60 miles to Edgewood. Then I remembered the tower itself, the broadcast antenna. Even without the main transmitters, the tower had a low-power emergency beacon, battery-operated, designed to signal its location to aircraft in case of total power failure. It wasn't designed for voice transmission, but maybe I could modify it. Rig a connection to one of the backup handheld radios, send out a repeating distress call, or just a warning. It was a long shot. My technical skills were mostly maintenance, not broadcast engineering, but it was something, a goal, a reason to keep going beyond just huddling in the dark waiting for the end. I gathered my tools, the shotgun, the flashlight, and headed for the tower access ladder. Climbing the cold metal rungs in the narrow, dark shaft felt like ascending into the belly of some ancient beast. Wind whistled through the lattice structure outside, a mournful, lonely sound. Each level housed more equipment, amplifiers, waveguides, junction boxes, all silent now, powerless. Finally, I reached the small platform just below the main antenna array, hundreds of feet above the ground. A hatch led outside onto a Narrow catwalk encircling the top of the tower. Pushing it open, I was met by a blast of cold night air. The wind was stronger up here, tugging at my clothes. Below, the forest stretched out like a dark, uneven carpet. Far to the south, Edgewood burned, the fires reflecting off the low clouds like a malevolent aurora. Distant pinpricks of light marked smaller towns, some dark, some flickering erratically. There were no headlights on the highways. The emergency beacon was housed in a weatherproof box near the main antenna feed. Working by flashlight, my fingers numb with cold, I managed to bypass the standard circuitry, splicing in the antenna lead from the handheld radio. I keyed the mic. "This is KBQR Tower. Is anyone receiving? Repeat. This is KBQR Tower broadcasting on emergency frequency. Outbreak. Confirmed. Infected hostile, resilient. Headshots required, cities compromised. Military response, uncertain." I paused, thinking of Clara. "Clara Evans, if you can hear this, I'm alive. I'm trying to. I'll find you." My voice broke. I set the radio to transmit the message on a repeating loop, hoping the beacon's limited power would hold out, hoping someone, anyone, was still listening. As I worked, I felt it again. That prickling sensation. Being watched. Not from below this time, from above. I looked up past the antenna array into the starless, cloud-choked sky. Nothing. Just darkness. But the feeling persisted. Intense. Focused. Was it the parasitic intelligence the voice on the radio had mentioned? Watching through the storm clouds? Or just my own frayed nerves finally snapping? A sudden gust of wind nearly tore me from the catwalk. It carried a sound, faint but unmistakable, over the whistle of the wind itself. A low, resonant humming, the same sound I'd heard in the Watcher's Gallery beneath Blackwood Creek. My blood ran cold. Different place, different horror, same sound? Were these things connected? Was the Watcher related to the parasitic intelligence? Was this outbreak something more than just a virus? Something older, stranger? I scrambled back inside, sealing the hatch, my heart pounding. The humming faded as the hatch closed. Coincidence? Wind acoustics? Or had something truly ancient noticed my broadcast, my defiance? I descended the tower ladder quickly, every sense on high alert. The control room felt different when I returned. Still dark, still cold. But the oppressive silence had been replaced by a low, thrumming energy. The same energy I'd felt from the black stone left on my doorstep back in Blackwood. The same energy emanating from the core consciousness crystal. It wasn't just the tower equipment. It felt like the structure itself was resonating with something. The single candle flickered, casting my shadow long and distorted against the equipment racks. I looked at my reflection in a darkened monitor screen. Just my own tired, grimy face stared back, but for a split second I thought I saw the eyes flicker red. I quickly looked away, grabbing the shotgun. Was I infected? Was it the proximity, the fear, the consciousness transference the voice had warned about? Or was I just losing my mind, trapped alone at the end of the world? Outside, the first faint hint of dawn painted the eastern horizon. I had survived the first day, the first 12, maybe 14 hours of the outbreak, alone at the radio tower. But survival felt like a temporary state. The world had ended, replaced by something hungry and relentless. The radios were silent. The power was out, and the things outside, and maybe inside my own head, were adapting, learning. My sanctuary had become a prison, then a potential tomb. Now, it felt like an antenna, broadcasting my solitary existence to whatever horrors lurked in the static between stations. Dawn was breaking, but the darkness felt like it was just beginning.